How yous, and welcome to Literary as Feck.
Oh, thank you. Thank you there, Nick, for that fantastically Irish intro. And
Well, I do my best, Clive.
You're not doing that for the whole...
No, I'm not.
There's something slightly strange about someone who does have an Irish accent doing
an Irish accent, yes. And I don't do a very good one, to be honest.
No, you sound more Irish than when you were doing the...
Yes, when I'm doing the accent, yeah. But there is, I'm sure I've said this before, in my hometown in Wicklow, the most common greeting is, how's she cutting? And the correct answer to that is fair to middling.
Fair to middling. Well,
yeah.
Who is the she and what is she cutting? Do we know?
My understanding is it's probably something to do with silage or something to do with crops. But to be honest, I don't have a farming background, so I don't know for sure.
No,
but I did milk a goat 2 weeks ago for the first time, and that was very exciting.
Nice.
Quite a dry teat.
Is that right? Was
yes,
that
yes.
Specific to that goat, or?
No, that's a good question. Not having any other goats to compare it to, I don't know, but I suspect that most goats have a fairly leathery kind of dry kind of boob.
See, when you're not laughing, you're learning, right? And
yep.
we've already given our money's worth.
All right. So this week on Literary as Feck, we're going to talk about a book called The Cyberiad by a Polish science fiction author called Stanislav, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, Lem, L-E-M, who is best known, I suspect, to most people who know him at all, as the author of Solaris, which has been made into 2 movies.
Yes.
And I think one of them you recently covered in an episode of something else that you do.
Yes, on the Magic Morning Wood with Ron. Actually, we did talk both of them in the end.
Okay, the remake as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I've seen either of them, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, I recommend watching the original.
Okay.
Yeah. For more details, listen to the podcast.
I will. I'll head over there right now. Oh no, wait.
Yeah, no, that's not a good idea, Nick. No.
But yes, I think most people would know him best for that. I read a book of his many years ago, in my early 20s, called The Futurological Congress, I think, which I liked a lot. But this book is recommended
to me, and I actually read it as well.
Right.
And I also really like that book. Also turned into a movie.
Yeah, I think I read about this just recently, but I haven't seen it. Okay.
It's a bit of a disappointment, actually. It was by the people who made... do you remember that film Waltz with Bashir? Another film we've actually done on the Magic Morning Wood, which was like... it was semi-autobiographical about someone who'd been in the Israeli army during the Lebanon War, and they'd kind of, keeping it light, they'd blocked out their kind of involvement or memories of the massacres in the camps. When the phalangists murdered the displaced Palestinians and all that, and it's kind of, it's not rotoscoping, but it's something like rotoscoping, where they film things and then animated over
the top.
Really, really great film. And then they used the same techniques to make it was called the Congress, and I thought, oh, this is going to be good. I thought these people and Stanislav Lem. So it was quite a major disappointment when I thought this.
But this book was recommended to me, I think at the age of 14 or 15, by my older cousin, Andrew, who had quite an outsized influence on my life, in that he also introduced me to heavy metal at that aged, whatever it was, 11 or 12. Role-playing games, 2000 AD, a number of things that he is 3 years older than me. A number of things that had a fairly profound impact on who I was. But this was something that I tried to read as a teenager, and it didn't grab me at all.
The Cyberiad.
And then, yeah, the Cyberiad. And then 30 years later, at the age of 45, returning to it, I have no idea what was wrong with me back then, because I don't know how you felt about the book, but I loved this book.
Okay, I think we have a difference of opinions here.
Okay, all right.
Just to clarify, because I wasn't sure, did you say you had read Solaris or not?
No, I've never read the book. No, the only other Lem book I've read is the Futurological Congress.
Okay, because it's one of the things that I find kind of interesting, and I am still very, very interested in Stanislav Lem himself, is across the 3 books, it's almost like 3 different writers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So set it up then. What is the Cyberiad? Like, how is it, what kind of book is it? How is it laid out? What's the deal here?
I mean, from my perspective, it's kind of an Aesop's Fables, or like a 1001 Arabian Nights, or Canterbury Tales about robots. Right. And in fact, at the beginning of reading it, I don't think I realized for the first story or two that the two main characters, if as much as there are 2 main characters, whose names, are we going to agree how to say their names? Is it Trurl and
Clapusius?
Clapusius, or yeah, okay, I'll go with that. Clapusius. I didn't realize they were robots themselves, because at the beginning of the story, they're kind of talked about as being constructors, and that they're building these robotic machines. Right. But then at a certain point, I suddenly realized something is dropped, kind of, and you realize, oh, hang on, they're also robots. They're robots building other robots.
I think this is something that kind of comes, so it's a, as you said, it's a collection of loosely interconnected fable-like or fairy tale-like, sometimes, short stories. And I think, yeah, by the time we get to the last one, I think that's apparent, right? Because that's the kind of arc of the stories in general, right? Where there's a sort of yeah, like you said, a fable-like quality where they've taken robots to talk about the human condition in a way.
Yes,
I suppose.
Yeah. And increasingly there becomes stories within stories within stories as you get further into the book. That one of the last kind of the whatever it's called, but there's a series of stories about machines that are telling stories to some other character.
Right.
You kind of get deeper and deeper into this recursive narrative kind of thing.
That's very 1001 Nights, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. But I don't know. It really I laughed out loud several times, which is not something I actually do very often when reading. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that Lem, across time and space, was able to make me laugh. Because the book was written in 1965 and then translated, I think, in the 70s.
Yes.
And it's quite a masterful translation, because there's a lot of wordplay. It almost feels like Lem is a bit of a Roald Dahl. Like he invents a lot of words, and then this poor translator has to deal with these Polish invented words and translate them into English in a way that works. And by and large, I think most of it does. And
there's a lot of alliteration as well, isn't there, used for comic effect, which is something we get to, but it's something that that's something that can be charming or it can irk you, and it did both at different parts of this book for me. And also, like you said, he use and rhyming slang and stuff. And there's a definite propulsive rhythm to it, which a poor translation would have kind of ruined. And even though I may not be as taken with this book as you, I certainly agree with you that in terms of translation, I mean, I don't read Polish, so I couldn't actually say for certain. But as far as I can tell, my instinct tells me that they did a really good job here.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that surprised me as well was that it shows a real nuanced understanding of computers at a time when computers themselves were still largely like punch card, you know, like like at one point there's a reference to random access memory. There's things I didn't realize would have been named what they're named,
right?
You know, back that far.
I also had it's interesting. It had this slight vibe of there's a difficult. I don't know what you'd call. If I was more articulate in general, but also in terms of science fiction and stuff, I could probably explain. But there's a type of science fiction, and I feel, for example, a lot of Japanese anime resides in this zone, which is, on the one hand, it's hard SF to a certain point, like it's proper, you know, it's not annoying, like not really SF like fucking Star Wars and shit like that.
Right.
But it's hard SF to a point, and then something takes over where you kind of take for granted a future where, like, if you think about the Ghost in the Shell films, for example, the way robotics work in those films are like, if you really stop to try and figure out how is that happening, you wouldn't be able to do it. But you kind of take it for granted that at a certain point, like in the Cyberiad, the mechanical or the electronic becomes almost biological or something. Like what's it called? Reaches the point of what was that? There's a word for it, isn't there? And there was a dreadful film named, what's it like a singularity or something like that? Not singularity. There's a point where technology kind of starts thinking for itself, and and there's a lot of that in here, right? Where where the biological and things that we think of mechanical or programmed are entirely interchangeable, or there's like a it's transformed, it's evolved, doesn't it?
There's definitely a feeling of almost a seamless move from the squishy biological, which does, I mean, some of that's quite funny, I think, later on in the book, where the revulsion that the robots have towards the general moist dampness of biological life.
Is it that last story? Is it that has the
the woman, or the female robot who's fallen in love with the idea of a human, and then realizes that they're revolting. Yes, pale faces.
But when a real pale face actually like so, much prefers the poser dude who has the
and I mean, you know, I think that like from quite early on, like one of the earliest stories in the book is the one where Trurl invents the machine that's supposed to, I don't know what it's supposed to do, but it can't add like 2 + 2, right? And it's incredibly obstinate and angry, and becomes quite dangerous and violent, and it's also enormous, right? And clearly, like, you know, operating at a very low. I know that just right from that point, I was like, this book is good. I think I'm going to enjoy where this is going.
That first story, actually, I thoroughly enjoyed as well. So how many stories were there? Is it like a dozen or something like that, right?
There's quite a few.
Some are quite short. Hang on, let me put it into show us your cover there. Show us your cover, love. Hang on. That's because I was reading it on Kindle, unfortunately. I don't have that's a nice cover.
And did yours come with illustrations inside then?
No.
Okay, because this one's fully illustrated with kind of these interesting black and white.
Do we know who drew them?
I think so. Actually, I don't know. The cover design is by somebody called Vaughn and Daniel Moroz, MRO, with some sort of symbol over the top, Z. So it's possibly from the original Polish version. Can
you find one more for us to show us there? I'm quite fascinated to see that.
There's.
Oh, those are nice, aren't they?
Yeah, they're well done, and they fit the kind of the time period.
The cover as well is isn't that the same artist who did the cover for the Futurological?
Yes, I think all of these, I think that they're Harcourt, Brace, Jovanovic or whatever. I think they're all of them were done by
how
whoever
many
that
do you think?
artist is.
I mean, we probably should have thought of researching this, but how many do you think there were in that? Because it's a very specific typeface, isn't it, with the big Lem?
Yeah.
And how many of Lem's books were released in that series, do you think?
I'll tell you right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. There is 20 of his books.
I thought you were just showing off you can count.
That I count, yes, yeah.
20,
so,
wow.
Yeah, and then another, so quite early in the book too is there's the story of the electronic bard. So I think it's Trurl invents a robotic poet.
Sorry. We just have our fittingly for this.
Okay.
Just had our wires crossed. You just counted the number of stories in the book, didn't you?
No, I counted the number of books in the series.
All right. Okay.
They did in fact publish 20 books of Lems.
Wow, that surprises me. Just because, yeah, especially back then. I mean, would he have? I mean, I can't imagine people rushing out to the stores to buy the.
Well, I mean, this one is published in 1974, but I have a feeling that they added like that the Cyberiad would have been one of the earlier ones,
right?
And then that they, but like I mean, this is probably a printing from quite a bit later on, so the list at the back is probably more from the 90s or something,
right? But still, that's quite. I mean, quite impressive to have that. I mean, I don't know how much he wrote in his entirety, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't all been collected in English.
No.
I don't know if they've ever collected. I would be interested to read, because I was reading about him in my sci-fi encyclopedia, and he wrote like non-fiction, like critical writings, you know, about other science fiction writers, and yes, I'm quite interested to read that stuff.
Not a big fan, apparently, of most of what was written in English. He was quite a cranky guy, it seems like.
See, now I really want to read him more now. That sounds a lot of fun.
Strong opinions, I think.
Has that stuff been translated in English? Is there like a one-stop shop, like, you know, best of Stanislav Lem's critical writing or something like that?
I don't know, but at this point, it would seem it would maybe, because I mean, he certainly seems his stature has maybe grown, I think, over time. Yeah. It's interesting. He was the Polish translator of Ubik. By Philip K. Dick, which is interesting. So he and Dick seem to have had some sort of relationship that wasn't entirely comfortable and smooth.
Right. Yes.
He initially had
about that.
Yeah. He had trashed pretty much all North American science fiction as garbage, and then later on made an exception for Philip K. Dick. But Philip K. Dick was already well into his nervous breakdown phase and accused him of being some sort of like Stalinist spy,
right?
You know, to bring down, you know, American science fiction or something like that, and had in fact reported him to like the U.S. government as being like, keep your eye on Lem.
That's right. I remember, and in fact, I mean, it gets mixed up in my memory, but I'm guessing I read the same biography.
Wikipedia entry.
No. There's what's it called? It's called Divine Invasions: A Life of Philip K. Dick, or.
Right.
Which is a great read if you're interested, even if you're not interested in Philip K. Dick.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, because Philip K. Dick seems to have fallen out with everyone at some point. But
yes.
I can't remember if it was Stanislav Lem. There's like you know, he turned up at like some convention or something, and there's a you know, there's a definite face-off. You know, like almost. It sounds almost as if it's, you know, like a rap battle or something like that.
Right.
Each other or. I can't remember if that was him or maybe someone else. I don't know if Stanislav if he ever went.
Well, he did. I'm not sure if he ever went, but he was for a while a member of whatever that science. I can't remember what it's called, but that the ones who give out the Nebula Awards, the kind of the science fiction writers, you know, and he was an honorary member for a while, and they took away his honorary membership at the point at which he was published in English, and then he took it as a personal affront, and it was all. But it was also. There were questions as to whether it was taken away because he had been so critical of a lot of American science fiction.
Right.
But anyway, there was a whole big to-do. Yes, early cancel culture.
It's interesting as well to consider. Yeah, well, yeah, so we'll get back specifically to bits and bobs in this book, but as I was saying earlier, the books are so different. So you mentioned Ubik and Futurological Congress. There's something of the Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, much more Philip K. Dickian.
Yeah,
for
whereas
sure,
this feels almost like, I don't know, I wrote down a couple of different names that it made me think of. I mean, it's just bouncing around my head. This is you know, obviously some of these people came after him before. But I was thinking Lord Dunsany, Mark Twain, Douglas Adams, a bit of Philip K. Dick, and even a bit, when in the bits that were more annoying for me, a bit proto Terry Pratchett as well.
Yeah. So I would say all of those seem fair. And I actually Googled recently. I Googled Douglas Adams and Stanislav Lem, just because I was interested to know, you know, and I found a very early interview with Douglas Adams right at the point at which maybe only the second episode of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy had been broadcast as a radio play. And he lists only two authors really as being major influences. One of them is Kurt Vonnegut, and the other is. And so things like the idea of deep thought, the computer that spends, you know, like millennia working out life, the universe, everything, and comes up with the answer of 42. I don't think there's any question that comes from here, right?
Yes, I wasn't entirely sure of the timeline of it, but yeah, I felt as if I wouldn't be surprised if during one of his long baths, his Douglas Adams had a Lem paperback next to them.
Yeah, no, he is very honest and open about it having been a huge influence.
But the Dick thing as well, I mean, I can totally see it as well from the Stanislav Grumpy Lem point of view. If there's going to be one exception to what you consider the garbage heap of American fiction, it is going to be Philip K. Dick.
K. Dick, yeah.
In a way, I almost feel like we should probably do a Philip K. Dick book on the show one time.
Yep.
I almost feel a bit spoilt by having read Philip K. Dick before having read much else science fiction, because it does kind of destroy, because you invariably compare, and well, that's not quite Philip K. Dick, because it like things.
Yes.
Not many things go that far.
There's a is the word fecundity to the guy's imagination, where like you'll begin a book and there'll be an amazing premise.
Fecundity.
He'll begin a book with an incredible premise and then throw it out after 30 pages and come up with something else, and then another 60 pages in, throw that out, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
And
there's a bit of that to Cyberiad as well.
But that's I think why I was enjoying this, because there are it throws ideas at you fast and furious to the point where you're almost overwhelmed with ideas.
Yes, and then just to complete my thought, and then Solaris is something else again. I mean, another great book, and again with so many ideas it can't keep up to it, but a much more stately kind of book. Again, a fast read, but none of the satirical jabs of Congress for this, and none of the craziness that's in Cyberiad. So for me, I started off agreeing with you for the first few stories. I was thoroughly enjoying, and then at a certain point, especially when it got into that stories within stories thing, the rate of inventiveness kind of got ahead of itself for me. Slightly annoying, because it was you just introduced hang on, and it was just, it felt like a waste of those ideas in a way. It was just, and it becomes slightly annoying, and it became a bit twee in bits, in parts, in a slightly, I don't know, I felt ever so clever, like feel how clever he thought he was being, and that got up my nose in some stories. But then suddenly there'd be another story. There was like, after a run of stories which I didn't like or didn't care for that annoyed me, and I thought, oh no, is it the rest of it's going to be like this? And then there was the one about the king who has like a miniature kingdom.
Right.
It becomes the moon, and that was brilliant. And I thought, oh, that's great. He's got it back again. And then the next story was annoying, and then the story after that was great. And so I was all over the place with this.
Okay.
But I didn't give up on it. I mean, which is saying something. I'm a very impatient reader, I have to admit, with things I'm not enjoying. I think you're a bit better at plowing through stuff you don't like, if memory serves.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't. I have little patience. So overall, it's not. I wouldn't call it disappointing at all, but it's definitely worth it for the bits that are good, the strong parts, and it's oddly deepened my fascination with Stanislav Lem just because it's another side of him, right? And I'm like. So I'm just wondering, like, how many sides does this? I mean, even if he's only just got these kind of 3, that's fine. That's enough. Most writers don't even have that, right? But you do wonder what lurks in his bibliography. So I do want to dive in more with Stanislav.
And have you seen him? Have you seen photographs of him?
I did see one, yeah.
Yeah, because he looks like. He looks like a cross between that actor who played the sidekick of the Red Skull in the Captain America movie, the little kind of droopy dog dude.
Toby Jones.
Yes, and Peter Lorre. Like if they had a child together somehow, it would be Stanislav Lem.
I think someone's got to make that, right? The Stanislav Lem biopic starring Toby Jones. I like Toby Jones in general, so. Very good. A very good Truman Capote.
Oh yes, yeah. But I think that for me, like there was certain things like there was a story quite near the end when they introduced this whole idea of like the I can't remember what it's called, but like the idea that there has to be by definition people in the universe that have reached the highest level of human development or the highest level of like development, right? And then either Trur or Clepaucius goes out to find them and discovers them, and they basically all lie around in the dust all day doing nothing, scratching their arses pretty much. And there's a part. One of the parts that made me laugh out loud was the part where he walks by one of them, and he has like a trapdoor in his chest, and he opens it up, and there's an obscene play taking place inside with a bunch of elves like doing something so foul that like he's so embarrassed and he kind of has to run away from what he sees. And then in the kind of the following story, there's a kind of a robot, self-flagellating mendicant character who kind of appears, and he has met. Maybe it's Clepaucius, and Clepaucius tells him about how he's going to go find, or he's going to know. I think he's already found them, and they've sent him away, and now he's going to recreate them, kind of like as a mathematical model within a computer to get to the bottom of. If they are the most developed species in the universe, why are they doing nothing but arsing around all day? And so then he gets into this whole thing about where he's asking them, how can we help other people? And they're like, well, we've tried that for millennia and it doesn't work. You can't help other people. There's no such thing as a utopia. You certainly can't help other people by revolutionary action of any kind, which leads me to wonder how in God's name he wasn't dragged off to the gulag. This is a guy writing under Soviet rule in Poland, basically saying there's no point to trying to make life better. The idea of utopia is self-defeating, and a revolutionary act is the worst way to try to bring about any kind of positive change.
Because there's such an endless churn of ideas and concepts. I think it was probably a bit dizzying for any censor to. I mean. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure he must have been on the radar of the censorious in the Soviet Union, right? But more like just keep an eye on him, kind of thing, rather than to have clamped down or chucked him in the gulag or something. Like I don't know enough about him, but when I was reading about him, I didn't come across anything like, for instance, the Strugatsky brothers, when they wrote Roadside Picnic and stuff. I mean, they were, you know, the censors did come down, and you could only some, how do you pronounce that word? Samizdat.
Yes,
You could only read like Samizdat, you know, copies of it. But as far as I can tell, Stanislav Lem kind of managed to, again, I don't know, was he like so respected or something, and had such stature that he kind of got away with it to a certain extent, or because I get the feeling that much like chess players and real astronauts, I have the feeling that science fiction was held in quite high regard in the Soviet Union. Like, I feel as if they took it seriously, right?
I think so, but then it's not the kind of edifying pro-utopian science fiction you would expect to come out of Soviet Russia, because it's so jaundiced. And this, so the story that it leads into is one of my favorite stories, which is the one where he says, well, we tried all of these things and none of them really worked, and it all just made things worse and everyone was miserable. So we decided to give up on the idea of attempting to intervene, you know. And again, this idea of, like, if you consider what was going on in the world at the time, where you have, you know, on the one hand, America constantly intervening in other countries' business and attempting to kind of it's their capitalistic idea, and then Soviet Russia, on the other hand, doing the same thing in all over the world as well. But then, yeah, so they whatever this thing is, altruisine, this powdered form of whatever, some drug that when introduced into the water supply will make you feel the emotions or the feelings of other people. Right. And the idea being that it will set up a utopia, because in that moment of feeling the pain of somebody else or whatever else, you will not be able to do them any harm, or you will only want good for them, because then you will get that good reflected back on you. And where the story takes that is so wonderfully awful and awesome. Like, from the first moment when they realize that, oh, they didn't consider animals, and so that all the mammals, and so that the cow giving birth causes everyone to go into, you know, hideous birth pangs. And all of the whole neighborhood showing up for the young couple who's about to have sex for the first time, you know, like hanging around in their garden in the hopes of getting some kind of secondhand buzz off of their first nuptials, or, you know, the person who gets chased out of town because they have a toothache, or beaten to death because they have a toothache because it's bothering everybody else. And my favorite one, the guy with the chronic migraines, who a few masochists hang around in his kind of radius and sort of softly moan in pleasure. As it was so weird and so hilariously.
It's a good example of one of the stories that works for me in that way, which is, it's almost like it reminds me of like when Wile E. Coyote goes over the cliff.
Yes.
And doesn't look down, right? So he just it's like grabbing onto the next thing, and it just about gets to the end. And at the end of the story, you're like, whew, like that, right? And that works great. But I think some of the other stories, for me, it didn't. Like, he does fall. Like, somehow it misses a step. And so did you not have a problem at all with any of that? Nothing. Was it just?
I'm sure there were stories I liked more than others. But overall, no, I have to say, I pretty consistently kept me interested. I read it over 2 weeks, so I mean, I kind of dipped in, and I read some of it aloud, actually, to my wife, doing a series of ridiculous voices. Sorry?
None of it irritated?
No, not really.
It's interesting you say that, because I read it, I think maybe you might be onto something there as well. Because I read it all in about 2 or 3 days, I think.
Yeah, okay.
So there might be something, a similarity between stories, or that kind of scatterbrain, kind of all condensed when you read 300 pages of it or whatever across it. I suppose, yes, that.
And I think it was written
like
as a series.
Kind of pad or something.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it was written as a series of short stories over time, and then kind of put into a book, and so in that way maybe spacing them out.
Yes. So if there's one takeaway from this gentle viewer.
Read it slowly.
Read it slowly. Read like
Yes.
a story a day or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, no, I definitely would be interested in coming back to Lem. And like you said,
sure.
I think the idea, as you point out, because I do remember, although it's been ages since I read it, but that the Futurological Congress is nothing like this, and is much more like as you said, a Philip K. Dick kind of a book.
Yeah, I mean,
and
it says a lot to me, at least. It says a lot for a writer that I've just put down a book of his that irritated me somewhat, and that makes me want to read more of him. That's that's a pretty glowing kind of review. So I don't know where I'm gonna go next. That's the thing. I'm not quite sure what's next on my. Did anything pop up for you, like this is supposed to be like a good next step in your Lem Odyssey, or are you just gonna choose something at random?
Well, to be honest, I was interested because I read that this is missing the final. The English translation is missing the final story.
Oh, right.
And that there was kind of an ending written that's not, for some reason, wasn't translated, and I'm wondering if it's been published since then, or not. Because there is another book he wrote, which I don't know if it's been. There was another one of these kind of things, like fables for robots, something like that, which is like possibly comes before this. And so but then if you didn't like this much, that wouldn't be somewhere you would want to go next. Potentially.
Well, no, I think I would just read it slower. It's my lesson. I honestly, I genuinely think my problems with it were more my approach rather than the material, and some of it was great. Like I said, I did really love 50% of it.
Memoirs of a Space Traveler, further reminiscences of Ejon Tichy. I've heard that's very good. And another thing I looked up was like Stanislav Lem, Rick and Morty, just because I realized that it seemed to me that the writer's room at Rick and Morty has been cribbing.
Interesting.
Been cribbing from this quite a bit. And so, and it was one thing that book came up in relation to Rick and Morty as being possibly
a John Tichy film stories have been turned into a TV series as well, I think.
Right.
There was a TV series made not that long ago, actually, as well, I think. So that'll be interesting. There might even be there are a few Lem adaptations, film adaptations as well. So that's always kind of a good, for me, I like comparing books to films. So that's always a good lead in for me to, I mean, Solaris, I read Solaris, I'd seen the film, couldn't wrap my head around it, then read the book and then went back to the film, and which is the same thing I had with Stalker as well, was couldn't wrap my head around the film, read Roadside Picnic, went back and kind of realized, this is quite astounding.
I know that Lem wasn't a particularly big fan of the movie Solaris.
Right. Who would, I mean,
I don't think he was a big fan of much of anything.
A big fan of anything, right? Like
but anyway, yes, I mean, I'm going to say an unqualified 2 thumbs up from me, maybe a slightly qualified thumb up from you.
Are we doing thumbs now, are we?
Who knows, right? I liked it, and I'll go on record as saying I liked it.
Right, okay. I liked some of it a great deal, and other bits were slightly more annoying. But then again, it seems obvious to say it's, but we mentioned, for instance, the name Terry Pratchett came up briefly, and I think that might be a clue as well. For instance, I think you have more time for Terry Pratchett than I do, right?
Yes, I think so. There's there within his series of books, there are certain lines, I guess, he's written. Like, he wrote a series of kind of books that are his cop books, the Night Watch books, and I enjoyed all of those quite a bit.
Right.
But there's other books of his that I'm less pushed on.
Right. No, there's a certain type of again, this problem of articulation. There's there's a certain area where, I don't know, where something becomes zany or
right. Yeah.
conscious,
Sure.
which I'm very aware rubs me the wrong way.
Right.
Whereas that's exactly the kind of stuff that other people find delightful, you know.
Right.
And for me, it's just.
I do think with him, that comes through loud and clear anytime anyone's ever attempted to adapt his work. It seems to be unadaptable to any other form other than books. And if it annoys you in book form, it's going to enrage you in television or movie form, because my feeling is if they're ever going to do a decent adaptation, it has to be played absolutely straight.
Right.
There can be no winking at the audience and no acknowledgement of what the ridiculousness of the situation is. Otherwise, it all falls. It's like a souffle that just completely falls apart.
Right. I think you may have mixed your metaphors up.
May possibly, yes.
I think souffle is like deflate or something, right? Rather. Anyway, it'll be fucking crap souffle.
Yes. So shall we call it a day, a night, whatever time of wherever it is in the world you are? What time is it there? I guess the same time as it is here, but 12 hours apart.
That's
9:46 p.m. in Canada. 9:46 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we're 1 minute ahead. What? How does that work?
Right. Enough of your nonsense, Nick.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Then. So until
all right. Well,
time,
thanks very much. It was. I won't even attempt to continue with that.
Jesus.
By the holy hokey.
I'm just gonna.
Thanks for coming.
Bye. Okay.
See you next time.
So in order to make this easier, I am gonna stop it.
Yes, I think that's a wise idea.